Hello, and welcome back to our third season of our podcast, Invisible Wound. This limited 5-episode podcast series is part of our larger project called Hakara, Facing Transgenerational Trauma. This project was initiated by Amcha Germany and funded by the German Foreign Office. Amcha Germany supports the Israeli NGO Amcha that was established in 1987 by a group of Holocaust survivors and devoted mental health professionals. Amcha Israel offers psychosocial support for Holocaust survivors and their families in 15 centers across the country. My name is Sharon Reiber-Kahn. I'm a Berlin-based filmmaker and third generation of survivors of the Shoah. This is the perspective I'll be speaking from. For this season, we took a new approach. By talking with experts and activists, and taking the body as the starting point of our exploration. We asked what trauma does to our bodies and how does it manifest itself over generations. Dear listeners, this podcast contains stories of experiences that may disturb you. It deals with topics such as war, sexual violence, and torture. Please take care of yourself and do not listen to this episode if you do not feel in the condition to listen to those stories. Good morning, David. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Hello, Sharon.
Please be so kind and introduce yourself.
I'm David Senesh, and I'm an Israeli-born psychologist. I wasn't born as a psychologist, but I acquired it later. Actually, I was born exactly 10 years after the end of the Second World War, so kind of that event is embedded in my soul and in my body. And I was born exactly 10 years after my aunt was executed in Hungary. And I was born into a story of bravery. She was a national hero in Israel. So as I grew up, I found that I'm growing up in the shadow and the light of that figure that was greater than life. So that was the start. And other than that, normal life until age 19. I was 1 year in the army, and then I participated in a war at that time, the Yom Kippur War, on the Egyptian front. And that will lead me right into the trauma story. And then the rest of the 50 years of my life that led me to this morning here, I've been to many places, and mainly I went along the route of mental health work, research, teaching, and such. But most of all, I'm married to Ilana, who is a writer, and I have 2 kids grown up. One lives here in Berlin, and the other one lives in Miami. So, in a way, I'm anchored, and I have deep roots in the Jewish and the Israeli identity. On the other end of things, I'm rootless, and try to be free-spirited in that regard, not to belong too much to anything, which might be also somehow related to trauma.
Mm-hmm. So, you know that this is a very specific podcast, which I will always lead us back to, which is how does collective transgenerational trauma impact the body? So why don't we start with that? First of all, your definition, but also then what are your thoughts about that?
Well, this is very tricky, and so many people try to define trauma in a way that will be intuitive and experience near, and will be very scholarly, anchored in research and such. So I've been in both ends of things, and it's not really something that you can say, this is it. And the way that the image that I carry in my mind and probably in my body as well, is that there was an intrusive impact of some external object that invaded my life, invaded my body, invaded my soul, and forever it was and still is foreign to my being. It's not part of me. It does relate to previous traumas, as the one that I mentioned before, and other events to come later. And that's are the trajectories of trauma that they come in different times, different developmental points. But the focal thing in my mind is that this invasive element in my life is also very evasive. So you can approach it with the language, discourse, research, interviews, and you can do it one-to-one, you can do it with yourself, you can do it with hundreds of people, which I did, in many different occasions. But as you get nearer to the edge and you look to the abyss, to the black hole, you see nothing. And whatever you see or you dream or in your nightmares and in your daydreaming, in your art and in whatever you are, you can catch bits and pieces of it in your memory, in your words, your bodily sensations, and they're never coherent. They are not congruent. They are bits and pieces. So it's very difficult to catch them all and make them into a narrative. And that's part of the definition of trauma, that it's a cut on the continuity of anything, of experience, of growth, of world vision, of feelings. Everything is being cut, and then you have to reignite yourself again. And then when things come up in your mind, then you going back and forth all the time. And you can learn to live with it in peace, relative peace. And as the life experiences and life traumas pile up, the next event to come will give it another color. It will color the event to come, like the present war. And the present war would retroactively play games with my memories. It's dynamic, it's dead in the sense that it's there and it's foreign and it's artificial, it's not used, but it's very dynamic in the way that it gets interactive with your mental tissues, Mm-hmm. So this is like a dialectical approach that doesn't let you be calm about it and say, okay, I have it, I know what it is, and that's it, and done. You never know when it's going to creep into your life or jump into your life. And I think this is part of the aftermath of the event. And I'm talking 50 years, and I'm talking 2 months. Mm-hmm. And it's all mixed up, people may ask me, as a psychologist, they may ask me questions as a nephew of the late Hannah Senesh and what I learned about her at home. And they can ask me about ex-prisoner of war, what's my take on the situation. And basically, I do not know more than the next guy on the block. Like, for example, they ask me, what do you think will be the situation of people who've been abducted now when they come back? I said that the most reasonable positioning to take is not to know. As an interviewer, as a therapist, or as an interrogator, if there will be one, not to know and to respect the uniqueness of that experience. And I say it very simply, like a little bit jokingly. I said, I was in jail, in the Egyptian jail for 40 days. These people have been more than 40 days. So just for that reason, not for everything else that is really different, but only for that reason, that I've been 40 days and they are 43, 44, 45 days by now, I cannot say anything.
this is very dense, and I want to start going into the various doors you've opened up for me here, okay? And my question to you is there at any point, talking about yourself in your own experience, but also others, that you feel that the body tells a story of its own that maybe does not, is not being seen enough or not heard enough, and that we maybe do not pay enough attention because we spend so much time describing what we feel or what we think, rather?
Yeah, I think there is... We are such cerebral people that we are using the language in a way that is very conductive and very productive. But then there are the things that the verbal network cannot catch. The holes are so big and things fall. On the one hand, anything that comes to the mind of the person while the trauma is happening and afterwards is channeled and filtered through our senses and our body. And I can attest to my own experience when I was, when you are very young and you are very powerful and you feel that you are omnipotent, you can do anything. I guess this is part of the reason why people at this age go to the army, because they are at the height of their physical power, when you almost feel like you can do anything, and your body and mind are geared towards that you are invincible, that you live forever, and that you can do anything. Now, it took us a few hours to realize that this is not the case at that war in 73. And but you are so busy to survive, not to get hurt, to hurt other people, to kill other people, basically. It's no matter how you put it nicely, this is what you do. That your physical being is all that matters. You don't philosophize, you don't psychoanalyze, you don't talk to yourself too much. You have to be focused. This is what I remember from my bodily sense, and sometimes even I long for that, because it's a very simple physical way of being. Then when you understand this doesn't work and you are about to die, then there is, this fight or flight, freeze. You actually freeze. And the next thing you do, you realize, and that was my experience when the commander of our fort made a decision to give in, to give up. We were like a group of about 30 soldiers, and we were all sitting at the same spot, and we just followed the orders. If you would have ordered us else different way, we would do whatever we were told to do. And as we went out from the darkness, we were like underneath, under the ground, and we came out. It was almost like we were bodiless. The feeling is like you float, bodiless, and you just float to another universe, to another life. If it's life or death, it's all a matter of seconds. You just go there. The only thing that I managed to do was to get rid of my rifle and my ammunition so that they don't look at me as someone that wants to attack. And then you just give in. You give in to whatever will happen. And you have no feeling. It's almost like you are floating in space. And whatever follows next is just all kinds of things that happen to you. You make any sense. You just go from one blow to another, from one pain to another, but there is no sense whatsoever. You're just there, getting pushed. And the whole scene is very surrealistic. Everything is running around you like like you're in the middle of something you don't understand. And that, of course, later on you are being put in confinement. I mean, they tie your eyes and they tie your hands and they handcuff you. And so you are motionless and you cannot do anything, and all you can do is avoid pain as much as you can and hope to get some water or food or whatever you start feeling that you need. And you're being pushed from one place to another, like there's a group of people, and you just flow with whatever happens. And then the surviving mind starts to work, so you know that you have to take care of your body. And that the problem, first and foremost, is that this body has to survive death, and now it has to survive hunger and pain. And when they start the interrogations, then your mind has to work hard. But up to that point, you are concerned about your body and to see where danger comes from, because you cannot see, you cannot control anything. So you are in a relationship with your body that you have to take care of your body. And everything that happens around you will be communicated to you through your body, because there is no other communication, no language, no eye contact, no nothing. You sit very in a condensed way so that you avoid the possibility that they would hit you in very sensitive places, and you kind of shelter yourself in that way, and you minimize anything that can put you in danger. And time has no sense. It's just you don't know day or night, so you're there, just there, and you kind of gather that you are alive, and that is a great miracle, because the way it looked before, there was no way that you will survive that disaster. But now you understand that you need to live through that indefinitely. It can be a matter of hours, days, weeks, months, years. You have no idea, because you have never thought about being a prisoner. It's a way of being within your body now and making sure that the body is okay. Then there was one moment that I lost it, definitely in great fear. I was sitting a group of people and being beaten very, very, in a very cruel way. And I guess each one of us was struggling what's best way for him to handle it. And one guy probably, I know it retrospectively, because we talked about it between us, because at that time we couldn't communicate, that he decided that if he pretends that he lost his mind, then they will be worried about him and they will put him under, either they will spare him the pain, or they will put him in hospital or take care of him. So he started to shout, "I'm an angel, I'm not a human being." And that was like, for me, it was very frightening, because in my own conversation with myself, I was saying, wow, it's just started now, and I think I can handle it. The body can take it. My mind can manage it. But if this guy, I have lost it right now, so what will be in a day, 2 days, or a week? So that really frightened me.
This was at the very beginning then?
Too much in the beginning, and I got the shivers from that, because I thought, if I lose that, then that's the end. Then later on, there were episodes where you are in daydreaming and night dreaming and awake or not, and they also hit you so hard that you lose consciousness. So it's like a baby. It's not awake and not asleep, it's cycles. And at that time, you sometimes have all kinds of delusions that I know now from the research, I know that it's also very helpful to have, because this is a way for you to have a hope, to have discussion with yourself on a different level. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're psychotic or anything, but at that time, little did I know. But that particular event marked for me a great danger for the mind.
Why?
Because I thought that, look, all the people around me were, all of them were fighters, okay? And I was the youngest among them. I was 19. Most of them were like from the reserve. They were older. I have a friend that was sitting next to me, someone I knew from before. We were like 4 people, and we were among people that we didn't know them. And he mentioned it to me. I didn't remember that. He said that, you know, the first thing that you told me, I said, I don't remember. He said, you said something so weird. You said, imagine that my school teacher would have seen me in a situation like this. And my school teacher, when we graduated from high school, was really a personality. She was a person that, also when we returned from prison, she was in school. They were waiting for us and, you know, like, bring us back home, you know. And she was a remarkable person. And that is something that I told him. I couldn't remember, but my mind was floating. So this is part of the relationship of this is what we take like a psychosocial entity, wholeness. It gets shattered. Even the psychic itself gets shattered, because the mind is there and the body is there, and the mind doesn't know about the body, and then the body doesn't know what's happening to the mind, and everything is like broken to pieces. And when you try to collect it, of course, it doesn't fit, because what you feel is not what you believe in, and your values are there, and your survival is there, and your pains are there. And you somehow get very close to the limits of the body, that, like, I can't take this pain anymore, and the limits of the mind, that I'm losing it, okay? And you have to ask the presence of the body to reassure, okay, I'm here, I take care of you, mind, you know, I take care of the mind, you'll be okay. Or you have to or the mind has to tell the body, okay, I know you suffer, I know that you are in terrible pain, I'm here.
So it depends on really what your need is in the moment to survive best. Is that what you're saying?
At that time, yes. And it's a trauma that also prolongs over time. And you have to all the time make sure that your bodily needs are, the basic ones, are taken care of. That's what bothers you. And then when your mind starts floating and going to other territories, then you start thinking, what's going on back home? What are the people thinking? What are they afraid? What happened to me? How they manage themselves? And would I ever come back? All these thoughts, you have plenty of time, endless time. So your mind starts floating, and then all it takes is the door opens or some noise, and you are back, startled, and you are back to your survival mode, and you have to be. Another thing that has to do with the relationship with the body, I didn't phrase it this way. I read it in Jean Emery book about compassion. He could capture words that I couldn't. And sometimes a poet can do it, sometimes an artist can do it. But you say, wow, I couldn't have phrased it in my mind like this. So what he said, I've never read it in any scientific paper. He himself was in Second World War. He was tortured physically very badly. And I think it was concentration camp or any other detention. And being Jewish, but I think also had something to do with the resistance. So he was tortured badly. Of course, that intertextualized with the suffering of my aunt in the Gestapo in Budapest. You know, when I read something, so it associates with something else, and so many layers to this. But he said something that I never thought before. He said that his relationship with his body changed afterwards because he felt that his body, his own body, is in the service of the enemy. They used his body as a machine that manufactures pain. Okay, when you torture somebody, you can do it psychologically, you can do it spiritually, religiously, you can do it many ways. Sexually, you can do it in many ways. But when you do it physically, the body of the victim becomes a vehicle in your hands to produce pain. And when you understand that it is the body that is in the hands of the torturer, then something happens in the relationship between you and your body. It's been your friend and companion, and now it turns into an enemy. It cooperates with it. And this is something that I couldn't really phrase in my mind by myself.
But let me ask you this. Isn't it your mind blaming your body for actually reacting to the pain? And actually it is your mind that is saying you are feeling pain, and because you're feeling pain, you are actually giving into the torturer, therefore making him successful. And isn't it really about, that sounds stupid, I don't know how to better phrase it, but acknowledging your humanity in that moment, which you cannot because you are in too much pain?
This is a very, very deep question. See, for years I was struggling with the right definition for trauma at all, you know, and we're getting back to this. And when I graduated in Canada, I did a PhD in Canada, and then I did 1 year internship in the States and back to Israel. I decided you are not getting any near to prisoners of war, of traumatized people, adults. You don't get any nearer to the domains where your injury has been. Not now. You're just fresh from school. Start your practice. Learn how to do your job, but do it from a safe distance. Okay. The last year of my internship, I was in the States, exposed to a new wave of practice that had to do with child abuse. Child malpractice just started to be, there was public awareness in North America that it's a disaster. And I studied that, being a child psychologist. When I returned to Israel, this awareness arrived in Israel. So I was volunteering and I was working with the children, and I had developed this expertise to work with neglected children, with abuse, sexually abused, physically abused. And I thought that I'm in safe distance from myself, from my traumatized experiences. Little did I know. Again, I came across the writing of Judy Herman, Trauma and Recovery. And there she writes something that I couldn't believe, that somebody writes a book for me. You know, it's just, I remember the page, I remember, and I read it already in Hebrew because it was like a Bible, you know, everybody talked about that book. And there she said, if you want to understand a child caught in friendly fire between his father and his mother, if you want to see what happens to a child that's been deserted by his parents, neglected by them, or being attacked by them, and violated by them, think about the family as a battlefield. You'll understand something. I was shocked. And then the other way around. If you want to understand what happens to an adult when he is put in a situation like this and is being neglected and is being forsaken and then is being attacked by other people, not by rifles and by ammunition, by other people, then if you want to understand it really deep, look what a child is going through in his family. And then I understood not only that I didn't go away from my center of my trauma, I'm there. And this was termed betrayal trauma. Betrayal trauma. And the betrayal goes in so many levels. It's your values, it's your identity, it's your relationship with your own country, with your own unit, with your friends, with your family history, with my aunt. Trust relationship that is in the basis of everything that starts from there. And then it's also the trust that you have in your own body, that it's there to serve you. It's not going to cooperate with somebody else. It's safe, and you keep it safe. And that it can also keep your mind, your soul safe, and not expose it to fears and anxieties and fear of death and fear of disease. So this has been violated on so many levels. So when it's your body is playing tricks with you, and when you get sick, that's what happens. Both ways. Your body's telling you you're not treating me well, and you're telling your body that's not the way to behave, like, how come I'm sick? It's not fair. And you are turning to physicians to help you. You're turning to psychologists to help you. You're turning to your leaders to protect you. You have your spouse, you have your children, you have a web of relationships all built on trust. So when there is a violation of trust in one front, you are being hugged by other agents. Your body, your spouse, your child, your community, your kibbutz. And when it's not there, what's holding you? What's holding you together? So the body is a major anchor there to organize your story, even your body is changing with time. It's not what it used to be and doesn't look like it used to be, and you only have this illusion that you are the same person. You're changing all the time. But you need those anchors. You need to know, this is my home, this is my country, this is my culture, this is my history, these are my traumas. Okay, these are relationships, the web that hold me together, and it's not working too well.
Going back, we're at a very specific moment of time, right? We're at a time where you are post-captivity, you have finished your studies, and you think you're safe and you want to make a good decision by not wanting to deal with prisoners of war because you think that this will trigger your own trauma. And as a professional, you want to avoid that, correct? Now, you start dealing with children who are abused and neglected. And there, you actually are beginning to face the other part of the traumas that you have had, and you've been...
Not just the other part, but even the focal point of the trauma, because the betrayal was so much the essence of the experience that...
Could you explain that with betrayal? Betrayal is like a word that misleads.
I would say on some level, you have trust relationship with your society, with your country. The main contract is based on this, that you, at least in Israel, you are willing to die for your country. And actually, in times of war, you are not supposed to become a prisoner of war. You are supposed either to die or to be injured or to be a winner. Those are the options. And this option was never contemplated before. There was a mutual sense of abandonment because I didn't do my share, but I didn't do my share in the contract because my country did do its share by neglecting us there. So it was like a double betrayal type of thing. And when I was dealing professionally with children, I could only appreciate how more difficult it is for them, because we're dealing with children in their families. The natural expectation is that the parents will take the best care, the optimal care of the children. When that doesn't happen, there is something more basic that is broken in the contract. It's a human contract between a parent and a child. And if that is not kept, then they fall into nothingness. When I was 19 years old, I had my structure, substructure. I could fall on myself. I could talk to myself. I could trust something in me. When you are 5 years old, 8 years old, and you're abandoned, or you're attacked, or you have been abused, you naturally would fall on your parents. But if they are the ones who do it, then what's next? What can you do? So once I realized that I'm in the eye of the storm, when I later developed other interests and other areas of expertise, I moved to other areas. I was teaching for several years in criminology. I was doing some research with indigenous people in doing traditional ways of doing justice, restorative justice, and mediation processes. I was kind of getting away a little bit from the trauma issues into other domains that always related to, but were not deep in that. And then in the past 15 or 20 years, I told myself, you can't get away from that. You have to walk alongside, and when it is relevant, but only when it's relevant, you walk through it. And this is really what I also got from reading the traditional writings of First Nations in Canada. They talk about the wounded healer, where you have to walk through your pain, and then you can be receptive. You don't project on him, you don't tell him your story, but when I'm faced or I'm with a person who's been through something traumatic, then I'm there at his disposal. But I listen through my own pain, but I don't make it present in the discourse. And this is a practice that is difficult, because you always want to, like I do now, to tell your story and to get recognition. First from the person who sits with you, and then with people around you in the profession, your own people, and then you want to get recognition from yourself. Okay, that's what happened. This is what it is, and this is what it was, and you live with this, and that's it. And while negotiating this, you are with another person with his story completely. This is why I say it's most important to keep humble, because I do not know any better. And all the time being asked, what would happen when the people come back? You have to be totally there and be aware that it's going to ignite your own elements from your own story, some that you know and some that will only be known while you are with that person. So I've been, in recent years, I say, okay, I retired from teaching, which after 30 years, and I was semi-retired from research, from formal research, and I keep doing my practice. And I decided to go right into the issues. So I volunteered into 2 organizations.
Before you go there, I just want to... What I sense we were circling around is really the aspect of transgenerational trauma, which is your own personal trauma plus, and you were saying how cumulative it is. And, you said it very clearly. You were born 10 years after the war, so you are clearly a second generation of survivors of the Shoah. Then you were in war captivity, and then you're a psychologist, so you were also talking about vicarious trauma. So then putting that all in pretending to put it in a nice box, how do you bring the different parts of your own trauma together?
There are certain points of reference. We call them trauma-informed, trauma-referenced stories, trauma-inspired. Because people always ask, is it PTSD or is it PTPG? Like personal growth. And the same person can have the two at the same time on different issues or on the same issue. So it can be trauma-inspired, it can be trauma-burdened, it can be trauma-referenced, it can be also what we're looking into now with a friend here in Berlin, we kind of exploring it, trauma-transformative, that you can move it to another field and mobilize your own trauma into working with people with other traumas and other issues completely. And take your personal experience and research and professional knowledge and transport it to other domain. It's not cut and paste. I gain some insights. Why keep them to myself? So there are many layers of trauma, and it's also you're embedded in society that is post-traumatic itself. I mean, everybody in the neighborhood was second generation or first generation. So you have this European feel to the neighborhood and to your family. My father was the brother of Hannah Senesh, so it's right from there, gained lots of publicity, and the family was raised like on a pedestal. My mother was Israeli-born, Palestine-born. So we have this divided reality of Middle Eastern and European. And then we had the whole burden of the Holocaust on the shoulder. But we had also the issues coming from my mother's side because she lost her brother. He was a pilot and he died. He was killed a few years before I was born, so I was named after him, David. So I have, both sides telling me stories, through my name. And then, of course, when you grow up, you understand that you are actually serving as what we called self-object for other people because they need you for something.
Explain that. That's important, please.
I was 6, 7 years old, and there were discussions around the table at home. My grandmother, my father, other people, and they were talking in Hungarian, talking in German, talking in English. They made sure that we don't understand, but we understood. So that was the second generation thing over there. And outside, there was another thing that was happening in the street, in the community, in the school, where people started to learn about the Holocaust. So you hear things about the Holocaust in the public domain, and then you hear at home, and then there are people looking at you and say, "You are from the Senesh family? Wow." So you're a 7-year-old and you see grown-up people looking at you, and all of a sudden they don't see you. They see you, your aunt, and you see the Holocaust in you. And they see in you the promise for other Jewish life. Now we are free and we are strong, never again, never again. We are the product of the revolution, no more diaspora, that's the promise. A great promise indeed, but in 1973, this promise was not fulfilled. And in 2023, the promise is not fulfilled. So,
what does that mean? This is a very interesting sentence, and I think, again, it's a very important one. The promise was not fulfilled, that what?
That we are going to build something that will be so resilient, of course, we'll be aware of everything that happened before through our festivities, through our history, through the Bible, through everything, which is, okay, that's what makes a people, right? But we are going to build a new breed here that will be immune, not resilient, immune. No more destruction, no more threats, no more fear. We are going to be the strongest in the neighborhood, and we are going to be the opposite of what we were before.
Which is what?
Which was a minority, depending on others. And then, of course, when you have a hero like Hannah Senesh, she also died. She was executed. So you need to have a different breed here. Now, I truly believed in it. And when I enlisted in the army, that was the spirit. Like, we are holding the front of Jewish history, including this big Holocaust thing that's hanging over us, and we are going to make it different. And in my view, what happened, and that's a little bit of political thing, but it's really, it accompanied me through my life throughout since then, is that in 1967 we got too much of a good thing. We got intoxicated. And then instead of being humble and thankful for whatever we have, we started to build ideas and fantasies and ambition and power that is completely out of proportion. And I was part of the machine. I believed in it. And after I failed and I was a prisoner of war and I returned back, I could no longer return there. I understood this is a promise that cannot be kept. If you are doing something to an extreme, it will come back to you. It is not something that is viable. It's not something that is possible. You are going to pay a price for vanity.
That's really interesting. Can you try to find other words for it than vanity? Because there's something nearly metaphorical about it. And I want to make it a little bit more graspable, in that I'm wondering, how exactly did it manifest, in your opinion, that vanity? And how do you put that together with those extreme days of suffering that you went through in captivity?
Before captivity, there was a transition that is not conceivable. You are in the strongest army, in a strong country, well organized, relative to where it is situated. And within hours, you see everything collapse. And you see a collapse of something that you never fathomed it's possible at all. And of course, the impressions subconsciously of the Holocaust are taking over. I was sitting in jail. My aunt was sitting in jail. My father was sitting in jail while escaping Europe. My grandmother was sitting in jail with her daughter. Your head is like going, wow. So everything changed and everything stayed the same. So when you return and to your home, and it's not your home anymore because there's this betrayal that happened, and the rest of the people around you continue with their lives, which is okay. You go to work, you go to study, you build families. That's life, the power of life. But there is something very deep inside you that was broken. And I'm not to the extent that I read in people who returned from the Holocaust and knew how to put the mind into writing, and they said, we came back to life, but we lived on a different planet. We didn't find home no more. We built our homes, our families, but we didn't find a home in humanity no more. Something was broken. Some people couldn't bear it, and Jeanne Emery was one of them, and others, that Primo Levi, they committed suicide. They couldn't take this. I could, and I take this compromise, and I can live in a world that is unjust and abusive to children and abusive to minorities, abusive to Jews, and abusive to Palestinians. I can live in this, but to a point. And I reached the point, not because of this war, I reached the point when I summoned my 2 kids. It was like 6-7 months ago in Jaffa in our apartment. Just the 2 kids, Omer and Odi. We're sitting together and we made a ritual. And I said, look it, I carry the burden of Jewish history. Okay, I played it very dramatically. And I carry it on, and you are going to carry our burden. Why? Because biologically, you are. And I apologize. Go. 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 Wherever you find that the place for you, go. And they did. So now I'm finding a home near to them, rotating from Jaffa to Berlin, from Berlin to Miami, and back. After this war, I don't know what I'll find in Israel. I've find a home, small home, in Amcha. Because we're so much helped by Amcha in our family that I said, well, I can volunteer to the sister organization of Amcha, which is BeNafshenu, which is very important for me. So I'm in the board of directors there. Amcha Berlin, of course, is the nephew. And for the past 10 years, I volunteer in a forensic group of psychiatrists, physicians, psychologists, social workers, and lawyers that are helping document and evaluate victims of torture. Where people around me, a very small group of people, can say no matter what politics and national affiliation or whatever, and no matter what profession you are in, tortures are not allowed. And that is the Committee Against Tortures in Israel. We are helping Palestinians, we are helping refugees who arrived in Israel, asylum seekers, and also Jewish people, even from the right wing, those people who claim they've been tortured by the police or by the Secret Service. We give documentation according to the Istanbul protocols, and only very few people are trained to do it. We are now trained to train other people. And this is very sacred, because this is a space where we are Palestinians, Americans, Israelis, Turkish people, South American people that are doing the same job. We go like 3-4 professionals together to the victim, not one person, 3-4 with a translator. And we're doing a day-long walk with that person to do full documentation with pictures, with words, with art, with anything, that we get a full picture, body and mind of that person, that will be also valid in court or valid in international court. I don't think that people will come back now, back home, and I hope it will happen today, will get this type of attitude from the authorities. They will not.
So this is actually what's bringing us to the topic back of this being a completely traumatized country, society, already prior to October 7th.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now to post October 7th.
So you have those layers of historical traumas before your time and those vicarious traumas through your profession, also through movies and books, anything. stories of other people. And then you have the interception of something that happens now, that nobody could even imagine that it will happen in that way. So I remember when I returned from prison, I went back to service in the army, and I was doing things that looked very simple and easy for me. And then I said in my mind, you've been through hell, nothing can touch you no more. And you are superhuman. Ordinary life events cannot touch you. And that was a very dangerous way to go. And it enabled me to go back to service and go full term into the military service.
When was that? When are we talking about exactly?
As we returned, we were hailed like heroes, and then after 3-4 weeks, we were put back to military service, and I continued to serve in the army full term. I went to officers course, and full term. Of course, I felt I owe the people, I owe the army because they brought me back. So I was in debt. I had to pay back my dues. And then I told myself, well, anything that will happen to you now in the army or later on in civil life, it will be easy because you've been through hell. So what else can be challenging for you in life? Well, I learned that other things can be very challenging in life. And I was lucky to have those lessons, because if you go through life feeling that you've been through hell and now you are immune, that means you are not going to feel anything.
Is that a way of describing the post-traumatic or the traumatized aspect of Israel because everyone goes to the army? Is that a way of saying that?
You know what? When you ask now, I would say like this. There are two extreme ways. One is that you're all the time alert and startled. The other effect of post-trauma that is known is numbness, not to feel. That's a great protection against life. The price is that you don't feel anything. You have to find a way of feeling again, moderately, simple things.
So that is the healthy way?
That's the healthy way, to get back to feeling. And I remember when I was growing up, there were two kinds of survivors, many kinds of survivors, but two that I told myself, these ones you can talk to, and these ones stay away from. They were all of them traumatized, but those that said, okay, I went through hell, I went through extreme experience. What you can tell me about your life or about what's happening now is nothing compared to what I've been through. And there were the other people, few, very few, that was so amazing. They could say, okay, look at me, I've been through something, but let's not talk about it too. You don't have to listen to my stories. I want to listen to your story. What was your day like in school? What do you think about this? How do you feel about that? They were looking through their wound, but they could listen to you.
So that means they were not caught in their own, for lack of a better word, narcissistic wound.
Right.
Because of their trauma, right?
And also they didn't numb themselves. They didn't say, okay, now I will not feel for anything less than life and death. These are simple things I don't have to bother with. No. Everything that happens has value for its own merit. And these were very few people that could and those people you were just being attracted to, because you know that they hold great truth, but they are not placing it on you. They are not judging you relative to what they've been through. And this exclusiveness is really a way of keeping you, away. And the other thing that I really think that is a real danger is numbness, not to feel for yourself, not to feel for others. And I think that this country that I continue to live in is numb in many ways to the suffering. First, suffering to the enemy, which is, at times of war, it's almost a must. But then suffering to the families, to their children, and than suffering to their own people.
But isn't that just too much suffering altogether? How do you regulate so much pain? And also, one of the things that I find truly interesting is, how do you express and explain to someone that amount of pain? Because I think that this is a big problem also of communication. I think it does something.
It does. Again, the shortage of words to explain what you've been through to yourself, but to the people who are close to you. And people now say, wow, I've been thinking about you ever since this war erupted, because we're thinking, now we understand what your family been through, what you've been through. Okay. And of course, it feels good to be understood, but I don't want to say too little, too late. It's never too late. It's never too little. But I don't want the suffering of other people to help them understand something that I've been through. I really appreciate when people who have not been through this, they've been through other stuff, they are making some attempt to understand. They don't understand fully, they will never, that's okay, they don't have to. And I also making the same attempt and effort to understand them. I will not be able to fully understand. But at least I will give them the feeling that I'm making my best effort.
Let me ask you this. Post October 7th, your first reactions, were they in your body or in your mind? What happened to you when the first news started trickling in? And how have you been, I'm sure you've been able to observe yourself throughout before having to respond to others.
Yeah. First of all, we are insulated because we are here in Berlin. So we are insulated. So we have to do something in order to be exposed to. We can actually make ourselves completely sheltered. But of course, when it was thrown at my face, I was shocked completely, and I think you stop breathing. And then, of course, you see the pictures because they were not filtered in any way. You just see what you see, you hear what you hear, and you imagine what you imagine, and you actually, it's like, I'll give you an example. When people watch football, soccer, on TV, people my age, why do they enjoy it? Because when they see it on screen, they feel in their body how it feels to play. I cannot play soccer now, but I actually, in my mind, I can play soccer. So that's exactly what happens. You are not there, but you know how it feels from the inside. Running away, hiding, being close to.
So it took you back to 73, though very clearly.
Yeah, very clearly. But I always say what I went through was really like a prelude compared to what they've been through. Because we're talking about children, we're talking about parents, we're talking about whole families that are being attacked, people running, people being trapped, people being intoxicated in a party, in a dance, in the middle of a dance. I was a soldier. I was, in a way, ready for that. And I was really at the best time of my life to deal with it. I don't know if I could have dealt with it now, but at that time. They've been too young, too old, in families, too fragile, It's just completely a different game. It's unbearable. Unbearable.
Which part does self-awareness have in coping with trauma, and what can we do, to help with that? We talk about the trauma as in the moment, the rupture, but what happens in the aftermath?
That's most important, because first of all, you're not always returning to the previous world. The world also changed. When you returned to Israel after the 73 war, it was a different Israel, it was mourning, young people, and that died in the war, and you all of a sudden come to a people in mourning. So when people go through political trauma, they end up as refugees. They start another trauma, not as marked, and it can be prolonged trauma over years, but they have to start new life in a different place. That's traumatic many times in itself. And there are people who, after the trauma, stayed and continued to live in the same place the trauma occurred, either in Poland or in Hungary, here in Germany. And the second generation and the third generation grew up here. How difficult or how easy it is to stay in the same place and everything reminds you. And most Israelis going through traumas continue to live in Israel, because this is their tribe, this is their place. So the good thing is that they're coming back home, but they changed and the home changed, and it's not congruent anymore. And they're trying to work it out so that they can be, again, part of society and live ordinary, normal, productive lives, which is not always possible. So I am always bothered and I'm questioning this. What is better, to stay at the site of crime, the site of the trauma, and try to emerge out of there slowly, or is it go to change completely to a different place? Then you have to start afresh, which is traumatic in itself. So which is which? So, for example, when I come to Berlin, of course, I feel already in the airplane, I feel I can breathe.
When you arrive, when you land?
Yeah. On the other hand, when I go on the train here, you know what happens.
Say it.
You hear an Achtung, that's all it takes to take you back to the trauma that you've never been to. Okay. And I've been visiting Germany from age 16, so many times. I think other than being in Canada and the States, most times in Germany. So here my life is going to continue because my son is going to live here, and it's very substantial, very important for me. So this is the site of trauma, but this is also now the site of security, especially with German politics now that take security of Jewish people here very seriously. And it was done very, very well. Very well. So it's all contradictory, and it's not clear how to be aware of your own suffering and the suffering of others without comparison, and yet to try to lead normal lives for the next generation. Both my kids have 3 citizenships. It doesn't happen by chance. And they have the freedom to be. Sometimes your own traumas you cannot choose, because if you could have prevented them, you won't be there. But when you step into the lives of others, of course, you are inviting yourself to very sensitive arenas. And I'll tell you about one of them. I was doing 2 research projects in Western Canada. I was looking into something specific that had to do with mediative processes, restorative justice, and how they work out the differences in their own tribes. And I was very much aware that I'm coming as a white person. So I always was excusing myself for being there, you know. And I was handling myself quite well most times, and made mistakes here and there, but they were very quick to remind me. They have a saying: first came the priest, then came the social worker. So I couldn't really hide behind being a psychologist or researcher, or I was a white person coming to colonize them. Okay? And I can appreciate it. Just as much as German people can appreciate that we have difficulties with German identity. I think, Okay, they can appreciate it, that's all. So but of course, if you come to do research, you cannot be too careful. You have to ask questions like you do now. So towards the end, I had an opportunity to participate in a ritual, in a local ritual. They were launching a canoe, which they prepared for a year, with young people carving it out, painting it, making a canoe artistically. And then they launch it. When they do that, the elders come and the whole tribe comes, and then they invite dignitaries to join them. And they have a ritual whereby they go the circle in the bay and they symbolize how they go back to the sources. That's the idea, to go back to our sources. I was very appreciative that they were accepting me for this ritual. And it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, it was dark, and there was a small crowd of people standing. The canoe was on the sand, and we were about. And then they went through doing purification with all kinds of herbs and stuff. And, you get a little bit from the also smoke doing its job, and get a little bit dizzy and stuff. And then the first group went around, and the rest of the people were waiting, and then the third and fourth group. And then as I was about to step into the canoe, the master of the ceremony stopped me and said, "You are not from here." I said, "No." He said, "Where are you from?" I said, "From Israel." He said, "You can't go." I said, "Why?" He said, "You are contaminated. Contaminated. You are in war?" I said, "Yes, you can go." I said, "But I was here for the past hour going through the ritual of purification, and I think I'm purified. I can go." He said, "No, you can't." He said, "The purification can only be done in your own tribe." That's exactly what we were talking before. And I said, "My tribe will not do it." I said, "So, sorry." And then the story goes like that. Like 5 years later, I'm teaching JTS in New York, in a rabbinical school. My students are rabbis to be. Amazing people.
What is JTS? Sorry?
JTS is Jewish Theological Seminars in New York. And like teaching them was like sharing different worlds. I'm a secular person, and we were talking. I was teaching them about trauma and how they, as leaders in communities, are going to deal with it. And I told them the story, and they look at me as an Israeli coming to teach, as one who comes from a very close, tight community. And I'm telling them I'm without a community. In that specific respect, I cannot find a home to do the healing. And then one of my students said, "I'm going to be a rabbi in 2 months. You're invited to my community. I will be your rabbi." It takes guts from a student to come to the professor and say this. And I was so touched. And I said, "Well, right this moment, עשה לך רב, עשיתי לי רבנית." And I have a rabbi. So I don't have really a community. I have community at home, being an Israeli. I have community here, being Jewish. I have professional community here and there in different communities and groups. I have my own family scattered. That's a family. But I wonder if there is a place called home, and if it is resilient enough to hold all the impacts and all the disasters. Okay.
That come with you, or
come with the trade.
With the trade.
Yeah. If you have a home, then it has to withstand the rain and the wind and the heat and the fire. And in the house, protected, can you survive all of these impacts? I don't know.
They say that hope dies last, right? So I'm sure you must be doing things to give yourself hope, right?
Right. If it wasn't for hope, why would I come here, meet with you and talk? Engaging in the discussion with another person is a sign of hope, because you know that by doing that you are going to be transformed, not just transfer knowledge, transformed, and hopefully the other person. And that's more or less what we can do here.
What else gives you hope?
First of all, you give me hope.
Thank you.
That you ask the questions and you really, you're stubborn. I mean, you want to get to the point, but you don't do it forcefully. And that's why you can go and get there.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate it. And I think that we just keep on going. We're not running to, we're not running away from, we're just standing to our beliefs and values when everything else is kind of getting shattered. And I'm not sure how much impact we have on things around, but at least we are not helplessly accepting everything, because resilience is the flexibility. It's standing flexibly. So there is some movement with whatever happens, but also there is a spine, there is equanimity. The butterfly here, the storm there, something will happen and will bring you back to some kind of a different balance. I believe this is possible, this is doable, and I think this is happening. I believe in good. So I keep on going towards that.
So sometimes it's not about imagining, being able to imagine hope, rather just keeping going? Is that what you're saying?
I think keep on going, keep living, going towards something. We have people who are very far away from us. They are very devoted Christians, our friends in Canada. And they know they cannot convert us. They knew it from the beginning. There is no way. As secular as we are, we are not moving anywhere. But we are like brothers and sisters, and and we asked them, the moment you realize that we will not join you in the most important thing in your life, which is your faith, why did you stick with us for 40 years now? And they say, because you are going towards the good. You'll never get there because you don't recognize whoever. And we laugh, and we laugh. But they say, you are going in the right direction, so we are going together. And that's all.
What if someone who is listening to this conversation wants an advice? And the advice would be about coping, whatever it is that they may be going through. And one of the themes that we have not spoken about, I still think it's an important one that we haven't discussed, and I think you're absolutely the best person to discuss it, which is one of the things that trauma does in the aftermath is create a lot of violence in us. Doesn't mean that you act upon it, but it's there and it's normal, right? I think it's an important topic we do not speak enough about, and I'd love to hear your feelings and your thoughts about it.
You're actually right that we are not talking, and not for good reasons. We are not talking about the violence in us that is awakening. And one of the issues that were not discussed widely in dealing with child maltreatment and child abuse in the literature was what some people called moral corruption, that we can corrupt people with violence, especially when they are young and still in the making, of their own personalities. So when you are exposed to violence, as Lipton, the great American psychiatrist who studied Nazi doctors, he coined the term proximity to evil. It's not either you are there or not, either in trauma or out of trauma, but a whole continuum of getting near. It's like radioactive, toxic impact on you that can be subliminal, and you're not aware of it, and all of a sudden it comes to full bloom. And he called it proximity to evil. And his idea also was that there is like connection between fear, threat, and violence and revenge. They are all dancing together. You want to protect yourself, so you want to prevent by attacking somebody. You want to take a revenge to let the other person feel what you feel. You are doing the same thing, eye for an eye. Okay, so you are connected to him. Now, through the pain, he can understand what he did to you. Of course, restorative justice is just the complete opposite. But you can't jump there. For example, in restorative justice, you cannot enforce it on a victim and say, we are going on a journey for you to forgive your victimizer. No, you can't do it without that. Otherwise, you victimize him again. So the best thing that I can say when you are very near in time, space to evil, is first of all not to be there if you can, but it sometimes happens so fast you cannot avoid, you cannot see it coming, and it's like an accident. It just happens. And I heard it from people who are talking now about this present war, and they say, well, I'm now in a state of trauma, mourning, to mourn the dead. I have my whole life to do. So the best position, I'm not sure it's doable, but I think best coping is to open a space within you. I know it's difficult in the trauma and soon after. And I would say the best position is to look, to inspect, to observe what's happening to you without a commitment to do something. I had in a very small group of professionals, an Israeli-Palestinian colleague, a lawyer, and she wrote, I'm so confused by what my own people did. And she's working for civil rights. I no longer know what to think, and I cannot stand myself not knowing. It torments me that I don't know, I don't have a position no more. And I wrote her back and I said, you are not under interrogation and torture. You don't have to provide answers. Not to me, not to your friends, not to your community, and you know what? Even not to yourself. You don't know what to think about it. Nobody can force you to.
This is a person who's capable in that moment of being self-reflective. Some of these feelings of violence that you see and that come up, and I think they come up individually, and I can just say that I sense that within myself, but also with others that I speak to,
Very much.
Are triggered. They are triggered by what they receive from social media. And they are physical. To go back to our subject, the triggers are deeply physical and in the body. And you're speaking about slowing down, essentially, right?
Slowing down. I'm looking at the freezing, the fight or flight freeze, as much as you need to act in order to get away from danger or protect yourself. You have to do what you have to do. But I think the moment that you can get all the tension out, you need the time to look at yourself, what's happening to you, to observe what's happening to you. And there you can find, especially in times of crisis, you can see everything is stored there, your prejudices, your fears, your paranoias, everything is there. And acting out is one way, but not the best. And I think if you count to 10, but if you observe what's happening to you in your body, and you observe what happened to you in your mind, I think you are in a better position to integrate those parts and give a more adjustable and more proper response, or not to respond. Some people say, well, if I'm not sure what to do, nothing you do will help or make a difference. That's helplessness. I think it's going inwards and just observing what's happening to you, slow down in this race of thoughts and feelings, And instead of acting on them, trying to be in them. And yes, I'm afraid from these people. I was in a group with Palestinians and I looked at a lady. It wasn't very flattering to me to say that. But I looked at her and in one of our discussions said, I can be afraid from you. And I know it's not very manly to say that. And I know that usually you say that you're afraid from Israeli men because they've been to the army. But I'm going to tell you now, listening to you, I feel that fear is coming and I don't want to repress it because why should I be afraid from a woman? It doesn't sit nicely with my stereotypes, but I want to look at my stereotypes too. That's why we're here.
And what happened?
She was shocked. She said later that she felt in a way I gave her something because she didn't think that an Israeli man can be afraid of a Palestinian woman. This is like the two extremes. I moved something within her. She's not sure what, but in a way it even empowered her.
What does it teach us?
These are very sensitive times because it's like a dialogue group, confrontation group, crisis, that the tendency is to go from complexities and integration of many, many, many parts into black and white, yes or no, us and them. And this is known, that's like groups go there, societies go there in times of war and confrontation. And we go there. We want to save ourselves, we want to kill the other person. Basic, that's natural. But maybe this is what you do while you are there. Mm-hmm. Okay. But you have the rest of your life and you want to process it and the shortcomings of doing that because we talked about it's a black hole. So I think that it's also an opportunity time because crisis is also opportunity time for change and growth. And if you do it with yourself and you discuss how comfortable I am thinking about myself like this, prejudiced, fearful, revengeful. Not to say no, I'm not capable of these feelings. Of course I am, and especially this time. And if you do it with compassion, with the others, but most of all with yourself, because this violence and aggression and disappointment and fear can be just as easily turned inward. The violence can go inward, and I think it is as important to be compassionate with yourself.
This is the path to then self-destructive behaviors, right?
Either destroy the enemy outside or destroy things within yourself that you cannot stand and you are not smart enough to project on your enemy. Because whatever you project on the other guys, you can fight it over there. Hallelujah, it's good. But whatever you don't project and you are sincere enough to know this sits in you, within you, you are capable of doing the very same thing that's done to you.
Does it mean that people who are self-destructive are more honest than the ones who project?
Not to the good. I mean, it's not for the benefit. And I also don't think that people who are terribly guilty, maybe it's good for society at large, because they will be maybe more reserved in using the violence and aggression, which we all have. But I'm not sure it's for their benefit. Like there is research that shows that depressed people are more accurate in their perception than non-depressed. The non-depressed are cheating themselves. There's even an article about more depressed, sadder but wiser. They are more smarter, but they are more depressed. It's a trade-off. I mean, how true you want to be with yourself and how much you are willing to pay for it. And it's a developmental, by Melanie Klein, it's a developmental stage moving from this split reality of good, bad, and good mother, bad mother, and all that stuff, to move to a complexity that each relationship with yourself and with others has everything in it. Not good and bad, but there's all the complexity and you can take and accept parts good parts from different people. And at the same time, they're also holding the bad parts. And that's okay. That's complexity. And you are just another person like that you can give things that are good, but you also have within yourself other things that can erupt, can be harmful. And not kind of resort to good, bad, them, us, and stuff like that. That's not being honest.
Another huge question coming at you. How do we move away from the cycle of transgenerational trauma and its transmission?
Well, I think that one good thing that comes to mind, but the price is terrible, and people could have thought about it before paying this price, is the limits of power. Because there is it's not a linear thing that the more power we have this expression in Hebrew, whatever doesn't work with force works with more force. People say it jokingly, but it's very true that people think more of the same will give more. It doesn't. There is an optimum, and then you start paying the prices. And I think we're long time past that point. And I think that if people understand the limits of power, that too much of something is not for the better, I think that is a kind of maturity that individuals can get to, and societies at large. And
is it power or greed or both?
I think when you say greed, it's already too much of something. When you say power, I don't go for these niceties, Nobody will have armies, nobody will have arms, world peace. It doesn't work unless everybody doing it at the same time, which will never happen. So I think you have to be responsible and you have to be realistic. And the same goes with trauma, because a trauma of individuals and also that are embedded in societies that are synchronized with those traumas, I think it's like being on a train without being aware that you're on a moving train. Everything looks stationary. And it's only by looking at other places that you see, wow, we are moving in a terrible speed to a terrible place. So I think that sometimes we just have to stop and see what is the point of equanimity or the optimum that we have to say, okay, enough is enough. And because otherwise there are cycles of trauma and then being causing the trauma to other people, and then again and again and again, and it's like, and there's a hope that you can break these cycles somewhere. And otherwise it's just self-fueling or self-fulfilling, and you just move your own misery to somebody else, and he or she is transmitting it to somebody else. But there's also a ripple effect the other way around, when people are exposed to good qualities and to good deeds. It's also touching them, It's not, you don't throw a stone and it's gone. It's forever. It's, it gives the... So I'll give an example. Today, people sent me a picture of a short video of a commander in the army in Gaza reading a poem of my aunt to the soldiers. Now, I know the poem by heart, of course. They didn't know the poem. And I was puzzled by his choice to read it there before they go to combat. And the idea in the poem, which I don't like to sum up poems, but the idea can be twofold. One is that when I'm in the middle of war, would I find human beings in the war itself? Israeli soldiers are going to find human beings. The human beings are the kidnapped ones, which is true. But the thing that I think that Hannah wrote was, the last two lines say, I have a small lamp, I'm looking for the human being. I don't know if I'll find one, but I'm not afraid if I will not find one. And this, I think people miss this. If I have the light and somebody that is a human being comes to me, I will not have the ability to see him. I lost it. And this is an interpretation that none of the people who sent me this related to. And I think this is as important. You are looking for human beings and you are trying to keep this capacity that you will be able to see this quality in other people. And the hope that it is there. Because it's so easy to do generalization and say they don't have it, they are not capable.
This is my last big question. The cultural differences in understanding trauma, which role do they play in your opinion?
It's hard to say. Practically, I have no... Look, when I was in Egyptian jail and I was tortured and I was interrogated and I had this... I've never seen an Arab guy in my life, 18 years, 19 years prior to this. Complete separation. I've never... Of course, I was exposed to the language and I learned in school Arabic, but I never had a conversation with one Arab person in my whole life until then. So I have no idea what's the cultural thing playing there, either being evil to me or being compassionate, because there was also a human being there. I remember a poem of my aunt, and I was looking, and I saw one. So
amongst your jailers?
Yes. And not only me, later on we kind of discussed this, and the same person was good with other ones. So the poem came to life. And I never had an Arab client or patient to be able to have a feel for that, you know. So I cannot answer from my guts and not from my professional experience. I'm sure there are differences in the conceptualization of trauma and how to understand and how to deal with it. What is a betrayal trauma? What is the physical part, the spiritual?
Do you think it is a relevant question? Because we did speak earlier about the specificity of trauma from individual to individuals.
Yeah.
I mean, where does that fit in?
I grew up at times that the term trauma was not used. Now it's used, trivialized. So, and I know historically that this is a term that was coined by the Americans when they realized there is a spillover of violence from ex-vets from Vietnam into the families and communities. They were like shocked. I mean, I'm sure that till now, still the waves of violence are still the ripple effect. And that's where they coined the DSM-3, they coined for the first time. And what they did, unfairly, they took something that is completely social and cultural in that respect, and they moved it into the medical domain. That is, if you are PTSD, this is your fault. You are not strong enough. You are not resilient. You are pre-morbidly destined to have PTSD. Something went wrong in your family. Attachment. You know, they came up with all those psychology bubbles. But they were not brave enough to say, this is something that we as society caused you. We take responsibility, we recognize your pain, we pay you back in therapy, in healing, in compensation. Mm-hmm. We have our own wars with the Ministry of Defense in Israel for recognizing us. And it took me 50 years to get that recognition, only recently. So, and now I hope the people will come back after the state of Israel forsaken them, that will be able to hug them back and help them in that respect. And when you said, what's physical thing can do the healing without the mediation of words, it came to my mind that the thing to say is a hug. Because when you are afraid and nobody hugs you, you hug yourself. And when you want to hit back and you're holding your hands like this, you restrain yourself, you don't. It's like what we're taught in school, right? In the kindergarten, put your hands in your pocket. And I think that when another person is about to be swept by violence, what we are trained to do is to hug. There is a therapeutic hug that can take from 10 seconds to half an hour. And you feel the anger turning into pain only when the hugging person feels it. And it's amazing. And it's done and it works.
And that probably would be universal and not, although maybe it is not universal and rather cultural. I don't know.
Maybe it's cultural. But I want to believe that there is a hugging function within us, that we can be hugged and hug other people, and without the words, without art even, that is even higher. That is very basic and it works.
Mm-hmm. I think that's it's okay to stay with that question. Is there anything else you want to share? What we haven't spoken about that you feel that we did not cover, that is important to you to say?
Well, I'm talking to myself with you, with your facilitation and you help. I usually like to do that. When I write a chapter or I get reviews, but mainly when I'm participating in panels or in lectures, then I have my professional others that help me reflect and ask questions and have ideas. So this is what I get out of it. Here, of course, it was like intense. We have another party between the two of us, is the one person that will listen to the podcast. And wherever he is, wherever she is, what she's doing, what she's after, the traumas. And I have some responsibility also to the person that listens, because I do not know anything about that person. And I think that maybe the last thing I would like to say, that sharing helps me. And that person who listens to us, to both of us, is helping us. And that if he or she needs similar help, she will be able, or he will be able to get it from others just the same. And that's a very important quality that we have. So if we have something, we should practice it.
Thank you, David, very, very much for this. It was. Thank you for being also so vulnerable and so open and going in both your professional and your personal life. Thank you for the trust.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Invisible Wound. In our next episode, we will meet Roz, who will explain to us the importance of laughter and how this can be healing. If you're interested in this topic, we invite you to listen to the past seasons. In the first season of this podcast, we focused on the perspective of First Nations Australians and their experiences of collective transgenerational trauma. In the second season, we were talking to trauma experts and artists who shared with us their perspective and understanding of transgenerational trauma. And if you liked what you heard, please consider donating to Amcha. Your donation will go to supporting Holocaust survivors in need and their families. You will find more information in the link below. And don't forget to rate us on Spotify.